Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Dr. Be Good podcast, where we strive to bring you the positive things going on in public education. And one of those things is keeping our staff motivated and positive about school. And so we thought that we would bring to you the representative who has been helping us, the company's been helping us for going on 6 years this year, to help teachers and staff share a voice in the goings on at the campus and central office level. So instead of telling you more about that, let me intro our people first so that we can get them in the loop. Tyler Adams, you want to tell us who you are and why you're here?
Thanks, Dr. Good. My name is Tyler Adams. I am the Senior PR and Communications Specialist, there it is on the screen, for TINYpulse. I've been working here for 20 months, and I'm really honored to be on the Ask Dr. Be Good podcast.
Well, we appreciate it. We love having the outside voices on our podcast. It really, I think it's important for our parents and our staff members to know that there are people working behind the scenes to help keep them motivated and positive. Who else do we have with us today?
Hello, I'm Lilly Chacon. I'm the HR manager for Legacy Preparatory Charter Academy.
Yeah, Lilly is our HR manager, and she has been my partner in crime all along this journey. And so, Tyler, before we get too deep into the operational side, tell us a little bit about TINYpulse, because the story behind it and how it got started is really interesting.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So TINYpulse is about 7 years old, and it started in 2012 when our founder, David New, was working at the second company he founded. TINYpulse is the third. And he began to realize that he was burnt out at the company that he founded. And he was really confused by that, really distressed by that, and took a pretty drastic step. He took what he called a Careercation. That's a book online that I'm sure will be in the show notes. And he took his wife and at that point 10-month-old daughter and convinced them to fly around the world on one-way tickets. I recently remembered that the first place they flew was actually to New Zealand, so had no plans of when he was going to be back. And as he traveled, as the CEO and leader that he is, he ended up talking to a lot of leaders around the world. I think about 60 of those stories ended up in the book. And one thing that he realized is that there was sort of an epidemic of leaders not really knowing what was going on with their staff. This was back in 2012. And one thing that really came up over and over again is leaders would describe the terrible feeling that happens when someone who you thought was going to be with your school or your company or your nonprofit forever comes and gives you 2 weeks notice. And David got to thinking, how can I design something that would prevent that feeling? Because he knew that feeling as part of what burned him out. And when he got back to Seattle, eventually, he founded TINYpulse. And as the PR person for TINYpulse, I love explaining the name. Tiny refers to how lightweight and unobtrusive and easy to answer in just a few minutes our questions are. You can only ask one question at a time through the platform. And Pulse refers to how regular. So it started off as an employee survey platform. And instead of doing this long annual survey that might take a long time for employees to do and a long time for HR to address, you pulse regularly throughout the year. And so we started with pulse surveys, and we built a lot more that I'm sure we'll talk about over the course of this half hour since then. And it's my favorite place to work in the world, although I would love to be a student at Legacy Prep.
Nice ending. So you guys started same time we did. We opened 3 schools in 2012. And 2012, 2013 was a little messy. I was principal over 2 out of the 3 schools, plus being superintendent. We opened Texas' largest charter at that time with 800 kids within the 3 buildings. And we hired 65 people that first year who didn't know each other, okay? Coming together in 3 different locations to start 3 Texas public schools. And by by 2014, we pretty much knew, Lily and I knew we had to do something, because there was way too much change for people to handle, and it was impacting morale. And so, Lily, do you remember back then what was going on as far as the drive that led us to TINYpulse?
We had a large turnover. Our morale, I think, with our employees was pretty low. It was just getting pretty bad, and we knew we had to do something. We wanted to see our employees that had started so motivated and excited. We wanted to see that in them again, and we wanted them to know that they had a voice in Legacy.
So can you talk about some of the things? Well, okay, let me say that I don't remember if it was you or me who happened to see that TINYpulse ad, and but we reached out to them, and we started working with them in 2014. Can you talk a little bit about the components that have helped us let our employees have a voice at Legacy?
Well, the components that we use, of course, are the weekly surveys. We do them weekly. I understand that other organizations do them less frequently, but we started doing them every week. And what that entailed is our employees would get a question sent to them every week. And now either we would use the question that TINYpulse would give us, or we would change it to work for our staff.
Right, but I think we were probably the first school to use TINYpulse. So they had more business-oriented questions, and so we had a chance to turn them into more school type of questions.
Right, that is true. So that was one component. One of the important things, and something that we've had trouble convincing our staff, is that it is anonymous. What I tell our staff is we can see what campus or department it comes from, but we cannot tell who is actually answering. So that's been a little bit of a struggle, letting them know that this is a safe voice for them. Then one of the favorites that our staff has is the Cheers for Peers. And what Cheers for Peers is that they can send cheers to each other, to their coworkers, if they help them out, if for whatever reason that they deem a good reason, is they send cheers to each other, and people love to get the cheers. And those can be sent anonymously, but it's hardly ever not. They like to receive, and they like to give the cheers. One of the latest things that we've started to do with TINYpulse is the onboarding. And what that does is when we hire somebody new, they are sent questions about their onboard experience. And we are able to see where we're lacking, where we're doing good with onboarding, and this way we can adjust our onboarding to make it a better experience for our staff.
And I think one of the things that we really encourage our staff to use are the suggestions.
Suggestions, yes, most definitely. We have gotten so many suggestions over the years, and that has proved to be quite helpful. It makes our staff not only that they're being heard, but they feel like they're decision making. So that's very important to us, for them to know that they are Legacy.
And I don't want to make this sound too easy peasy, because they're training pieces here. Over the years, we've had to learn to not only encourage staff to use it, but to encourage our administrators to use it as the anonymous, positive tool that it is. We've actually, had to talk to an administrator who gets a negative suggestion and then, gets after the staff for having put it in writing. Well, that's certainly, that's human nature, and that's part of why we do this. Think about it. If we didn't do TINYpulse and we didn't find out that an administrator had that tendency, then we couldn't fix it. And so TINYpulse allows us to help the supervisors, help the administrators learn to use it in a positive way so that our staff feels comfortable actually saying maybe uncomfortable things. And unfortunately, many adults don't feel comfortable saying uncomfortable things face to face, but they'll say it if they have an anonymous vehicle through which to do it. Lilly, can you think of any suggestions off the top of your head that we've actually done? Because I know that when I go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in Central, it was very simple. We wanted coffee, and someone suggested we have a coffee machine, so you got us a coffee machine, and we considered that a win for our Central staff. And that's just a very tiny part. But we have had suggestions from our campus staff on motivational activities that they can have for campus. Just all sorts of suggestions from our staff.
So
and
sometimes I'll go to a campus, and I will see brought to you by TINYpulse.
Yes.
That somebody had suggested, and I don't remember what it was, but I remember seeing
new
the sign.
copiers. New
Oh, the new
copiers
copiers.
also.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think we did put a sign by the coffee machine brought to you by TINYpulse.
Brought to you by, yes.
And
that
that
is correct.
suggestion came from TINYpulse's emails that they send to you and me, right? They always send out
Right.
emails that from best practices from other companies that have used TINYpulse, and that one was a great one. So again, we learn from each other, and so TINYpulse is not just about rolling out a question every week. It's about rolling out HR type of journals, articles, best practices to keep the information about how to make our employees feel valued on a weekly basis. So let's see, any other, the wall of wins?
Yeah, actually, I had somebody called me yesterday, and they started talking to me about a problem at school. And then they said, you know what? Never mind. I'm going to TINYpulse it. When does it start? So that was really
right.
nice to hear. Yeah. So they know where to go now. So
Yeah.
that's good.
And so what, over time, and of course it's not just TINYpulse, but we have had less turnover. This year was our best year ever with our lowest turnover that we've had in 7 years. So certainly that's a win. Do I think it's all TINYpulse? No, I think it's a combination of all the things that we're doing that works to make our employees feel more valued. Definitely having a tool like TINYpulse sort of lets our employees know we're serious. Now, getting our employees to use it regularly can be a little bit of an issue sometimes. We've had to be very creative with our motivation to answer the questions. What did one of the campus directors do, Lilly? I think they promised a food truck. Yeah, they promised if she could get 100% participation, then she would get them a food truck. And we had participation in the 20s first couple years, and it inched up 30s. Then she started getting, this was 2 years ago, she started getting participation in the 90s. Unheard of. And I think they actually did reach 100%. And Lilly and I presented with a couple of our directors at TinyCon last year on some of the best practices, which was fun too. So I like the way we continue to be able to benefit both ways by not only getting the best practices and so forth from TINYpulse, but we're able to give back through their conference and help others that haven't done this as long as we have. So, Tyler, I know you had some questions for us that you were curious about.
Definitely. I'm going to make this the title of the podcast, the Ask Dr. Be Good podcast. I get to interview Dr. Good, who I did meet last year at TinyCon, so we're friends already. And before I get started with those questions, I just wanted to say that I think you are model partners for TinyPulse. And one thing that you mentioned that I thought was really critical is that it's not all TinyPulse. We work hard on our product and our platform, but the best product or platform in the world won't matter unless leadership is really invested in listening to employees. And the way that you do that, we're really honored that you use our product, but it's what Legacy's done with it. You can use a hammer to build a porch or throw it through a window, and you've really used TinyPulse in an excellent way. And I was just smiling really broadly. I don't know if you can see me on video when you're talking, but just smiling as you described implementing suggestions, and it's so much part of your culture that someone said, I'm going to TinyPulse this, and hearing about response rates going up, that's all just wonderful. I wanted to hear about what made you decide to start using onboarding. Just a little background before you answer is that Onboard is the only part of the platform that's not anonymous, and that's because we saw and determined over the years that onboarding is just so critical to the employee experience, and getting off to a good start really sets the tone. First impressions matter, and so you want to be able to improve if things are going pretty well and correct if they're not going well at all, so that your staff can get off to a great start and serve the students.
Lilly, you want to take that?
Yeah, the onboarding we consider it very, very important because legacy success is our employee success. We want, first of all, our scholar success, and then our employee success. And we want to be able to support our employees so they can be successful. And if we don't know what we're doing wrong, we can't fix it. As Dr. Good always tells us, do not suffer in silence. So this is why we've given them the platform with the onboarding, also to let us know what we're doing wrong so that we can correct it and we can help them be more successful at Legacy.
And it's really good timing when the onboarding came on, I believe a couple years ago, because we started getting better at onboarding. I will tell you that when you start 3 schools at the same time, you sort of don't do everything right. And some of the things that should have been part of our critical practice wasn't, and that was when we brought in new employees, we had a tendency to put them into the classroom, put them into the position, and then maybe give them support along the way, instead of bringing them in and sitting them down for a day and having somebody run through our most critical values and beliefs and mission statement and vision. And so we started doing that better a couple years ago, and that's why it was really nice to have an onboarding way of, a way of measuring the onboarding that we have put in through TinyPulse. So it's sort of it almost looked like we collaborated together on the timing to do that. So that way, your onboarding component helps us know whether our onboarding component is helping them effectively.
That's so great to hear. And if I may provide just a little employee perspective here, since I'm not not an HR person, not in leadership, I just use the product. Of course, we use our own product here. I didn't have the best onboarding experience and have the best first week. Our trainer was out. I was sort of looking for things to do, and I was really grateful that I could write, hey, this first week was a 4 or a 5 out of 10, and they fixed it. By the second week, it was much higher, and I felt really validated in my decision to work for the company I work for. In your case, the school that you work for. That leads me to my next question is, as educators, had you experienced anything like TinyPulse before? Was there a history of using annual surveys? How did you gather employee voice before in those first years, or in your career before that? How did you hear from teachers, from staff, before you started using TinyPulse?
Well, let's see. Since I've been in the business a little bit longer than Lilly, I'll just say that there have been attempts over the years to do climate surveys, right? School districts do that. And it's not unusual for a school district to send out a survey at the end of the year, or maybe in the middle of the year, to know what's going on. What I will say is that first of all, if you're only going to do it once or twice a year, you probably haven't gotten the buy-in from the staff to answer honestly. And then, and you mentioned something that was huge, the response rate from the district is hugely important, and that was often missing. You said that TINYpulse responded by the second week. That is something that we really, really work with our supervisors on, to say, guys, they've told us now, you know, it may have been uncomfortable, but we need, you know, we can write back and say thank you, because that's how we ask that our administrators and our supervisors receive tough news. We always thank them first, and we say, I'm going to work on that. So, and that sounds easy, but it's hard. It's hard sometimes for people to hear that maybe there's something they are doing, or, you know, people that they're in charge of are doing that need to change, because it's not helping the climate of the organization. So the response rate is critical. It either, you know, gives you credibility or it doesn't. And so it's a training piece. Mm-hmm.
Lilly, did you have any experience with employee surveys or gathering employee voice before you started using TINYpulse?
No, like Dr. Good said, I was at a large school district before, and I remember them the district sending a survey at the end of the year. As far as I know, with my coworkers, really nobody really answered them. They were too long. And so it was really a waste of time for the district to even try and do it. So I think this...
I come from a family of educators, and sending a survey at the end of the school year seems like maybe the worst time you could ever send a survey.
Yes, agreed.
Well, it sends, to me, it sends, does a district really want to know? Mm-hmm. There's an underlying, hey, why would they send it at the worst time of the year if they really want me to take my time and answer it honestly? So there's some of that.
I think what you mentioned, Dr. Good, about credibility is something that you've established so much at this point, going into year 6, that it's a commitment that you've made to hearing employee voices and responding to them with wins and responding to suggestions and paying attention to what people are actually saying. I think I just want to affirm and congratulate you on doing that. And there's something that you said that I can pull back the curtain a little bit. When I work in marketing, I'm next to a whole team of customer success folks who you could think of as just consultants for organizations that use TINYpulse. And a common piece of slang that I had to learn was a tiny punch. And I was hearing that my first couple of weeks. I was like, what does a tiny punch mean? We're really big on tiny branding around here. And a tiny punch is when someone gets their feelings hurt based on employee feedback. And it's something that's really natural. It's something that's going to happen, because if you've never asked a workforce before and they believe in the anonymity or are willing to be honest and upfront with you, you're going to hear something that was going on outside of your field of vision, like David learned with those CEOs. You don't know what you don't know, and it's going to come in and it's going to hurt your feelings. And some organizations are that pain, that reaction is too much. I don't want to see that. I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to call and cancel my account. We try not to work with those organizations, but at Legacy, you're doing exactly the right thing by having administrators respond, thank them for the feedback, and pledge to work on it, and then you actually do work on it. One thing that we really stress is that doing nothing with feedback is probably worse than not asking for it in the first place. If you ask employees for their feedback and then don't do anything with it, you actually see participation go down even further in our experience. And so the fact that your rates are rising means that you're doing something with the info.
I'd like to think so. It's good to know that our turnover rate has increased, that we're getting buy-in from our staff. And of course, we still did get new staff this year, and so part of what we will do is use this podcast as an opportunity for them to learn more about it, it'll also become part of our onboarding, so that, again, they're not hearing the same person saying something about TINYpulse. They're hearing it from you. They're hearing it from us who have actually been using it. And I think that makes it more relevant, and maybe that they'll value it faster.
I think we have time to address this. Lilly brought this up, that the hurdle of anonymity, people not being sure, if a platform can be trusted and not being willing to participate in it, that's something that we see over and over again. And if I may, I just wanted to address that TINYpulse is completely anonymous, and that's part of the value of using a third party like us. Is if it were coming from Legacy, if it had all this Legacy branding, I think it would be hard for people to believe, like, oh, I'm pretty sure they can look this up. I'm pretty sure they can track this through my email, through something. But I think one of them is that organizations and schools, and as you mentioned, Dr. Good, I think you were the first school to use TINYpulse. We have more now. We have a whole education client base, and I'm sure a lot of that is due to your success. So thank you. But anonymity is always hard to trust when it's coming from an employer, because most of the history of gathering employee feedback by organizations has been the furthest thing from anonymous. It's often had your name attached to it. And that's a commitment that we made really early on, and won't waver from. And I can send you, we can attach to the show notes or wherever this is published, our commitment to anonymity is really thorough. And so for the staff and teachers listening, I can promise you that it is anonymous.
I always I try to give them the visual of your survey goes straight to Seattle. And so, and then they do something with it, and we just get the results. We just get the data. And so I try to put that simple visual in their head that their survey never hits our hands. It goes straight to Seattle, which I wore green today for Seattle. Okay, you have brought us towards the end of the show. It's like I mentioned earlier, 30 minutes equals 5 minutes in here, but certainly I thank you for taking the time out to be on the air with us, to help to explain how we work hard behind the scenes to motivate staff, to keep staff positive, to give them a voice around the running of the school and the district. We seek their voices. We want to know when we're not at our best, so that we can quickly redirect. So thank you, Tyler Adams, for being on. Lilly Chacon, thank you for taking time out of this very busy time period, beginning of the school year, to come on and help us help people, and I just won't say staff, even parents understand how hard we work to keep our staff feeling positive, because there's actually a book out there called Feed Your Teachers So They Don't Eat Their Students. And so what the whole premise of the book is that if we keep our teachers happy, our students are going to be happier. And that is our work. So thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Lilly. We've come to the end of our show, and we thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Good. Thank you,
Tune
Lilly.
in to the Ask Dr. Be Good show. For more information on Legacy Preparatory Charter Schools, visit our website, legacypca.com, or call 469-249-1099. And remember to like us on Facebook, where we stream live weekly Tuesdays at 3 p.m.